Okay, so August 3rd, 2021. Here is an architect I knew nothing about until yesterday, and even today I don't know a lot, but I do know that I love one of his works or one of their works because he didn't work alone. So Hidalgo Moya, let's see, just a second. So here it doesn't say. He was either born on July 3rd or he died on July 3rd in 1920. I actually like the way he looks. There are two things that attracted me to this architect. This picture, in a way, not totally, but in a way, and also one of the works which I think is brilliant. I said their works because he had a partner, Powell. The firm was Powell and Moya. Powell and Moya, and he was American, so Philip Powell and Hidalgo Moya met while studying at the Architectural Association in London and worked for Frederick Gibbard before setting up on their own. In 1946, they collaborated under the practice Powell and Moya and became the founders of humane modernism. Interesting wording. In their mid-20s, they won a prestigious competition to build a housing complex comprising 1,600 homes in Westminster, London. The Churchill Gardens estate replaced 33 acres of war-damaged property and is notable as the only housing project completed under the ambitious Abercrombie plan to redevelop the capital along more so-called efficient lines. Tall housing blocks interspersed by maisonette terraced houses, pubs, and shops. The estate was a pioneering example of mixed-use development for a wide social demographic, and stylistically it was heavily influenced by Walter Gropius for its mix of concrete frames and brick paneling. Powell and Moya's subsequent housing was dedicated to high quality, low cost, high density living, and the majority of it has become desirable property for both its architecture and location. Whilst housing constitutes the bulk of their work, the practice gained fame and recognition for their futuristic Skylon Tower at the Festival of Britain in 1951. I add. They also designed a number of other important modernist buildings, including several buildings for Oxford and Cambridge colleges. I will only show now this work, the Skylon Tower, which I thought was brilliant, and I thought, and I think, and I will think that it's very possible Constantin Brâncuș would have laughed it, because it's very similar with some of his birds. The Skylon, London, 1951. Look at this. It's a triumph of spirit, of the human spirit. And I mean, just for this work, I become now very interested. Well, there are paradoxes here because the other works of this Powell and Moya firm are very different from this. But this work in itself and just by itself is capable of stirring up my imagination and my admiration. So this was from 1951, and you can see it was quite big. I mean, you see the silhouettes of the human beings at the base. But it is in its, I even found the word futile, connected with this tower. Well, if it is so-called futile, it is beautifully so. And it encouraged me to continue to think that John Ruskin was right, that the most beautiful things in life and in nature are the most useless. And he gave us an example, the tail of the peacock and the lily. This might be also useless, but I think it is beautiful, and because it's truly about the aspiration. It is the aspiration of the human spirit, which I hope will not die. I mean, I wonder if the architects had in mind some of the birds sculpted by Brunelleschi. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. It doesn't really matter. But I think this work is magnificent. These are the two architects, and I have the feeling, I could be wrong, the man we are paying homage to today is the one on the right, the one born in the United States. I mean, I don't know. They work together. They met at the Architectural Association in London, which was and is a brilliant school encouraging creativity, creativity, and creativity again. So, you know, maybe they both conceived this tower, but Moya is obviously part of this team. Here is the duality I was referring to, that on one hand, they did the work on the left, and on the other hand, they did the work on the right. The work on the right is also good, but very different from the work on the left. And I have seen more works like the one on the right. Anyway, we'll continue this short review of the Skylon Tower. This is an image during the construction process. And I always thought, and I will continue to think, that architecture is beautiful if it is an adventure. And if it is not an adventure, it becomes just a, you know, a déjà vu, and it becomes a, you know, in a way, a sad activity. If architecture is not creative, then the very raison d'etre of my presentations disappears, because what I'm trying to show every day is the work of creative architects. And when I say creative architects, I actually use a language not quite properly, because there is a redundancy here, which is could be even annoying. Architecture cannot be in any other way but creative. When it is not creative, it doesn't deserve its name, meaning architecture. Look at this, you know, it's almost like a bird by Brunelleschi. Bravo to them. And here are some drawings of this so-called futile thing. You know, I mean, here we see some lines, you know, diagrammatic, but this was built with matter and, you know, with materials, with fighting against gravity, with, you know, engineering problems, which had to be solved. And they were solved. A very interesting work, and hopefully, if I continue to do this series of presentation next year, I will show other works by this firm and by Hidalgo Moya. Although it's possible that equally creative was Powell. But when I typed the name of Hidalgo Moya, usually these works showed up. So I don't know. I have to try now to see if I type, you know, the name Powell, if this happens as well. Here they are. I like the man on the right, and he doesn't. I mean, I know nothing about him. I only saw a picture or two, but it's something about him that I like. I have a feeling that of the two, he was the poet. But I could be wrong. Appearances could be misleading. Anyway, they got along well since they had a prosperous activity together. This is a view, well, drone view of the interior of the Skylon. Quite a futuristic structure. And then this is the last image about Hidalgo Moya. Hopefully in the future, I will say more, or I will know more, I mean, both, about him. Now we go to, since I go in reverse order, we'll go to Joseph Paxton, the creator of the Crystal Palace in the 19th century, meaning in Victorian England. Okay, Joseph Paxton, 1803, 1865. He was actually born on July 3rd. In this case, I know for sure he was born. So, as you can see, Sir Joseph Paxton, 3rd of August, 1803, and he died in June, 1865, was an English gardener, architect, engineer, and member of parliament, best known for designing the Crystal Palace and for cultivating the Cavendish banana, the most consumed banana in the Western world. This was the man, a man of modest beginnings, and for this, it is even more remarkable that he, arrived where he arrived. He arrived at the position of being part of the political elite and also the creative elite in architecture, but he was born under very underprivileged circumstances. I appreciate this because this shows that if you have something to say in the world, to contribute with something in the world, you can do it. Of course, there could be unfortunate circumstances, but in general, let us not forget, I mentioned Brâncuș. Brâncuș was born in a little village, in Hobița, and then he arrives in Paris and revolutionizes culture. So that it is clear that it is possible. That is, if you follow your path, if you believe in your path, and if you work hard, you might succeed. The conservative wall at Chatsworth is kind of a greenhouse. He was famous for, well, greenhouses had been known even before Joseph Paxton, but he developed them. And this is an early work by him, which still exists, a narrow and long greenhouse. Now we look at Annie Paxton, that was his wife, standing on a Victoria Amazonica leaf in the lily house. Paxton's design for the Crystal Palace took its cue from the organic structure of this plant. So here is his wife. I don't know where he is. There are two gentlemen here. Anyway, this was an engraving or an etching published in a newspaper in 1849. Named after William Cavendish, Cavendish bananas were cultivated by Paxton in the greenhouses of Chatsworth House in 1836. They account for the vast majority of bananas consumed in the Western world. This is just an aide-memoire of some of his achievements. Then we'll go in more detail in some of his works. So I guess, these are the well-known bananas that somehow, are connected with Joseph Paxton because he began to cultivate them in one of his greenhouses, I guess. Great Conservatory at Chatsworth, built from 1836 to 1841 and demolished in the 1920s. Too bad it was demolished, but it seems human beings cannot abstain from deconstructing themselves when the elements or some other powers don't do it themselves. So this was demolished in 1920s. Sad because it was an engaging building. Now, in 1851, the Great Exhibition in Hyde Park, he did the Crystal Palace, the famous Crystal Palace. I will read about it. Sir Joseph Paxton, a facsimile of the first sketch for the Great Exhibition building, about 1850, pen and ink, you'll see the drawing. What happens was there was a competition. Maybe I have here a text about how he came to build this building. There was a competition, but apparently the results of the competition were not satisfying to the those who evaluated the competition. And Paxton didn't enter the competition, but when he learned that the results were not yet settled, he made a proposal himself, and he was able to build it. And this was an initial sketch. Sorry for the resolution, it's not very high, you can see very well, but you can approximate a connection between what you see and the building that we are going to see later. This is, we will arrive at the building more in detail later. So I guess this is also a plate. He loved plants, he loved flowers. So this I think he made this drawing, which was published in the magazine of Botany. And now the Paxton Memorial at London. Now this is not his achievement, but it was built for him. And the Mentmore Towers. He also built a few buildings, although he is known primarily as a gardener and as the author of the Crystal Palace. But because he became famous and also politically, engaged in the society of his time, he received commissions for ample buildings like this one. Chateau de Ferrières, another building built by Joseph Paxton, who was a self-trained architect, not to say an amateur architect. Now, St. Peter's Churchyard, where is the grave of Sir Joseph Paxton. Here it is. Unfortunately, I think this grave is not, this tomb is not very graceful. In fact, I think those around it seem to be more gentle, at least with the landscape, than this, rather heavy Domus Eterna. But what can we do? I only hope that it wasn't him who designed it. The bust of Paxton in Crystal Palace Park, as a willful man, and willful he was, and he was successful. Now the conservative wall at Chatsworth, we already saw an image of the work, and I like this greenhouse because it also has touches of of architecture. It's not just an utilitarian structure, but it has also more or less discrete touches of, maybe this could also be problematic because historicism plus greenhouses, maybe they don't mix very well together. But also on the other hand, because of it, here we have a work rather unique. I mean, we are not going to see very often something like this, related to a greenhouse. Yesterday, I talked about Lacaton and Vassal, and what we see here is a condition that is rather similar to what they do in the present time. Anyway. Yesterday, I expressed the thought that maybe human beings should abstain from trapping animals in zoos and trapping plants in greenhouses. But this was done, mid-19th century. We live now at a different time with climate change, with issues of sustainability, with the rising levels of the seas and so on. There is an interesting word that was used some time ago in Arch Daily, that is rewilding nature, that is allowing nature to go back to its undomesticated stage or state, and maybe that's not a bad idea at all. Also related to it, maybe we should remember that before Eva or Eve, the domesticated woman who had to accept the degrading story that she was born from the bone of Adam, maybe we should remember that before Eva or Eve, there was Lilith, the primordial woman, the wild woman, who certainly would not have accepted to be born from the bone of the man, of Adam. In my opinion, the Bible was written by male theologians, you know, because if there was a woman there, I don't think she would have accepted to have Eva, some kind of a, you know, second class being, you know, born from the bone of the man or the male. Anyway, back to Joseph Paxton and his greenhouses, or greenhouse, well, for the moment greenhouse, but he built others. Sometimes, you know, the relationship between what we love and what we do for those we love is complex, you know. Is sometimes, I don't want to get now entangled in paradoxes, but maybe there is some truth that sometimes we kill what we love. Because here you wonder, you know, this man loved plants, but why did he trap them behind a glass wall? Anyway, yeah. But it's architecturally is a rather pleasant structure we look at here, and also because it is in steps, because of the sloping land. And anyway, this is one work by Sir, I underline Sir Joseph Paxton. Now the great conservatory at Chatsworth, which was demolished, already saw, but not from this angle. Too bad it was demolished. This building would have looked interesting even today. But again and again, I mean, maybe I express myself in a primitive way, if not a banal way, but I'm thinking that if God wanted, when he created the world, if indeed he created the world, wanted the plants to be inside a greenhouse, he would have created the greenhouses too. I'm not totally happy to see these plants trapped within the buildings built by man. In as much as I don't like, you know, to look at animals that are, you know, caged in zoos. But yeah, the human being is still dreaming that he or she is the master of the world, if not the universe, and can do anything, the measure of all things. I think that philosophical idea that man is the measure of all things should be debated today very, very strongly. Look at the building, it was quite big. I mean, look at those people, you know, suspended almost on the facade of the glass facade, or with some glass parts of the great structure by Sir Joseph Paxton. And here are the proud builders, the doers. Raluca, who is here, she had an interesting thought that maybe doing is prior to thinking. We can talk about this, and I think it's a very interesting topic. So, but doing and knowing are correlative. If you do without knowing, is as bad as knowing without doing. The two need each other and they complement each other. I think they are correlative, and ideally they should come together. But it's not easy, it's true. Sometimes the one who knows doesn't do, and the one who does not know. Maybe more than sometimes, maybe very often. Anyway, here it is, the work of Joseph Paxton. Now the famous Crystal Palace, his most famous work. And look at it, indeed, it was huge. I mean, look at that vehicle in front of it. I mean, this was a pharaonic structure built more than 150 years ago. If this building was built now in megalopolis, you know, it would have been praised as, you know, appropriate for our time, although our time should consider building less giant buildings, I would say. Look at the interior, you know, I mean, we're talking about pharaonic structures. Well, there, you know, it was immense. And it was built by this man. I'll have a text about him, and it was also praised by Queen Victoria. I'll read about it. So it was built rather quickly. So the Crystal Palace was a glass and cast iron structure built in London, England, for the Great Exhibition of 1851. So 170 years ago. The building was designed by Sir Joseph Paxton, an architect and gardener. Interesting combination. Architects usually are not gardeners, and gardeners are not allowed to be architects. But when you have an architect who was also a gardener, you are facing a special situation. And revealed breakthroughs in architecture, construction, and design. More on the, sorry, this text is not mine, more on the Crystal Palace after the break, whatever the break was. So in January 1850, a committee was formed to choose the design for a temporary exhibition building that would showcase the latest technologies and innovations from around the world. The Great Exhibition of the Works of Industry of All Nations, as it was called. The structure had to be as economical as possible and be built before the exhibition was scheduled to open on May 1st, 1851. Within 3 weeks, the committee received 245 entries, all of which were rejected. It was only after this that Paxton showed his first interest in the project. And already a famous gardener at the time, Paxton experimented extensively with glasshouse construction. Using glasshouse also means greenhouse. The two words are interconnected, and they are used alternately to describe the same thing. Using combinations of prefabricated cast iron, laminated wood, and standard sized glass sheets, Paxton created the Regent furrow roof design. In 1836, this system was used for the first time in the Great Stove, the largest glass building at the time. This was the sketch that he based his design of the Crystal Palace on, his first intuition for the building. Paxton proceeded to visit Hyde Park, where he quickly doodled his famous concept drawing of the palace, which you just saw. The drawing included all the basic elements of the building, and within 2 weeks, all calculations and detailed plans were submitted. 2 weeks. And this is a fragment of the building. Paxton's design was based on a 10 inches by 49 inches module, the size of the largest glass sheet available at the time. The modular system consisted of right-angled triangles, mirrored and multiplied, supported by a grid of cast iron beams and pillars. These basic units were extremely light and strong, and were extended to an incredible length of 564 meters. The design was also influenced by Paxton's passion for biomimicry. He drew inspiration from the giant leaves of the Victoria Amazonica water lily. We saw that image with his wife sitting on one of them. Anyway, so a detail of the building, and then impressed by the low-cost proposal, the committee accepted Paxton's innovative plan, leaving only 8 months for construction, which commenced immediately in Hyde Park. 5,000 workers handled more than 1,000 iron columns and 84,000 square meters of glass. All parts were prefabricated and easy to erect, and every modular unit was self-supporting, allowing the workers freedom in assembling the pieces. Thanks to Paxton's simple and brilliant design, Over 18,000 panes of glass sheets were installed per week, and the structure was completed within 5 months. And here it is. Too bad it was just like the other work he did, demolished, just like the skylon of Moya that we saw, which was also already equally destroyed. It's incredible what human beings do. Now, Queen Victoria, the great Queen Victoria, wrote in her journal on May 1st, 1851, "This day is one of the greatest and most glorious of our lives. It is a day which makes my heart," so again, this is Queen Victoria, "which makes my heart swell with thankfulness. The park presented a wonderful spectacle, crowds streaming through it, carriages and troops passing. The Green Park and Hyde Park were one mass of densely crowded human beings in the highest good humor. Before we neared the Crystal Palace, the sun shone and gleamed upon the gigantic edifice upon which the flags of every nation were flying. The sight as we came to the center, where the steps and chair on which I did not sit was placed, facing the beautiful crystal fountain, was magic and impressive. The tremendous cheering, the joy expressed in every face, the vastness of the building with all its decoration and exhibits, the sound of the organ, all this was indeed moving. And it was moving even for a great empress." So, you know, some images from that time. When the exhibition was closed 6 months later, the structure was disassembled and then reassembled in the South London suburb of Sydenham Hill. Tragically, the building was destroyed in a fire in 1936. So it was not because intentionally was demolished, but sadly it was destroyed in 1936. Paxton's ingenious design created an unprecedented exhibition space, the construction acting as a self-supporting shell maximized interior space, and the glass cover enabled daylight. The method of construction was a breakthrough in technology and design and paved the way for more sophisticated prefabricated design. This was the plan of the building. Well, schematic as it is, but you get the idea that it was indeed huge. And yes, it took a gardener to build it. Now, the Mentmore Towers, 1852, 1854, historically simply known as Mentmore, is a 19th century English country house built between 1852 and 1854 for the Rothschild family in the village of whatever. Sir Joseph Paxton and his son-in-law designed the building in the 19th century revival of late 16th and early 17th century Elizabethan and Jacobean styles called Jacobethan. But you know, this was very common in the 19th century to use various styles from previous centuries to build buildings. And this is what the gardener Sir Joseph Paxton did. Quite a big building. And you wonder, how come a gardener with not even training in gardening was able to build it? Well, this was actually not so uncommon. There were great amateur gentlemen in Victorian England who became great architects. It was a different time, you know. Anyway. I mean, this building is a convincing proof of the talents of Sir Joseph Paxton, even though it is not a greenhouse at all. vast spaces here as well. Well, he's remembered now, especially for his contributions to the greenhouses or the glass houses, and less in relation with these works. But I felt it was, appropriate to also show works which are which were done by him. Now, Chateau de Ferrières, almost perfectly symmetrical building, quite large itself. I don't know why it is called Chateau de Ferrières. Was it built in France? I'm not sure. The interior is, again, a convincing piece of work. Historicist and colorful. Obviously, he was good with chromatics as well. Not too much color here, sorry, but here we are back to color. I love color, so I welcome it anytime it shows up. Anyway, this is a historicist architecture. We might not be so impressed today, although I don't think there is anyone who would not love to have such a living room, even today, or maybe especially today. But this was not for proletarians, that's for sure, this building. Okay, so now we go to an architect who is challenging for me because I love Borromini. For me, he was one of the most important architects in the world. And I pray that I will be able to convey my emotions relating to presenting, or yes, his works. He died on this day in 1667. He committed suicide actually on August 3rd. Some say because of his enmity with Bernini. Who knows? He was a complex man, a mathematician, a monk, a brilliant architect, a difficult man, as opposed to Bernini. For example, his masterpiece, San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane, he refused to be paid for it. I wonder how many architects today, and not just today, would do something like this. Well, he worked for God, and I guess he was not needy, but shows something of a very special man. What kind of a man would do that kind of work, a complex work, time-consuming and so on, refusing to be paid? He refused to get paid because, he apparently he explained that he couldn't work for God and at the same time get paid. Again, a very unusual man. I love Borromini. He was truly a master of the Baroque architecture, a grandmaster, in fact. Here is the man in a self-portrait. Of course, at that time, an architect also painted and drew, and they were artists. They were not homo economicus. They were not businessmen. They were artists. This we must know. So, one of the most important and original Italian architects of the 17th century, the buildings designed by Borromini transformed Rome into a Baroque city. In its buildings, the combination of full and empty masses gave rise to a dynamic movement and the theatricality unique in the Baroque style. More than his contemporaries, he managed to create in his architecture an effect more fantastic than rational. Good for a change. The first real architectural task was the design of the church of San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane, indeed his masterpiece. Soon after, he realized Saint Ivo alla Sapienza. His last major projects were the College of Propaganda Fide and the Philippines Ottery. This is, as we saw already, his self-portrait. So, well, here it says the 2nd of August. In some other sources says the 3rd of August. Whatever, the 2nd of August or the 3rd, we are still paying homage to one of the greatest Baroque architects and one of the greatest architects ever. A leading figure in the emergence of Roman Baroque architecture. These are the famous works that we already read about. San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane, Sant'Agnese in Agone, Sant'Ivo alla Sapienza, and Oratorio dei Filippini. Hello, Mr. Borromini. We are thinking of you here. The relation between architectural forms and philosophical structures in the work of Francesco Borromini in 17th century Rome. This was a book published by this gentleman, John Hendricks. He even made it on the banknote in Switzerland, because he was actually born in what today is Switzerland, the Italian part of Switzerland. San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane, a small church in the corner of a street, well, at an intersection of two streets in Rome, not too far away. Well, if you arrive in Rome by train somehow, you know, from the airport or whatever, it's not so far away from Stazione Termini. This is the you know, the plan of the intersection of the two streets is here, and there are 4 sculptures or statues or statuary works in each corner. And the interior of the church is quite moving, because it is literally moving, because there is the dynamics of the Baroque spirit that animated Borromini are so explicit and you know, and moving. It's not about a circle in the center, but 2 circles, meaning an ellipse. So an ellipse has 2 centers. And the ellipse is always bringing in that irrationality, which could be scandalous for a reason. But we need that beneficial scandal to challenge the dry reason and to bring in emotions which reason does not know about, as Pascal put it in with some different words, but maybe with a similar meaning. The heart has its reasons which the mind does not have. Okay, so there is much to say here, you know, and if I didn't have to cover a large body of works, I would maybe I would just stare at this and not just at this picture and say nothing, because you know, I mean, here are some sketches that this brilliant man drew, but from these sketches to actually arrive at a building built of stone, you know, it's a long distance, and there are many sophistications here. You know, it's the kind, it's an architecture which is also speculative, in the sense, in the British or in the English sense of the word, speculative. We don't practice a speculative architecture these days, because we are consumed by the prose of functionalism and mercantilism and profit making and all the rest. What can we say? From the outside, the building is not so impressive. I mean, one facade, this one, is, because it is Baroque, but the other one less. But the inside is a different story. Sculptures. Are we using sculptures today to adorn our buildings? Of course not. Of course not. We have no time for that. We have no money for that. We are busy to sit on our comfortable sofas and watch soap operas on TV. We don't have interest in embellishing our buildings with great artworks. We don't believe any longer in the marriage between the act of building and other art forms. This is the facade, the Western facade. You enter the building through this facade, and it's the most animated and very Baroque. You see the undulating curves, convex and concave, and these are the dynamics, the dialectics of the Baroque spirit. I do not know the narratives. You know, someone who is knowledgeable about the intricacy of theology probably could verbalize maybe important things. I do not know them. But one thing is for sure: if we allow the eye to read what it sees a complexity which indeed can be named Baroque. Rome has great Baroque buildings, and they had some great Baroque artists and architects. Bernini was not just was one of them, but he was not the only one. Pietro da Cortona also, and others. The thing is, you know, when I look at this entrance into this building, and this was built, you know, in mid 17th century. I am asking myself, are we building today buildings which 3 centuries from now will attract tourists or visitors? Now, of course, you know, we don't build churches like this, you know, but still, I think that the desire to build significantly should exist. Otherwise, I'm not sure there are many architects today who believe that their buildings will still be alive 300 or 400 years from now. I don't think so. Anyway. So this is San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane. Quattro Fontane, why? Because there are 4 fountains, one in each corner. This is one corner, and there are 3 others at this intersection. There are 2 streets that intersect here, and in each corner of the intersection, there is a fountain. The agitation that probably animated the soul of Borromini is transmitted to the stone, is transmitted to the facade, the elevation of the building, to the building itself. The ceiling is surreal, and only a great mathematician and geometer could have done something like this. You know, I mean, if this was a circle, would have been a little bit easier, but it's an ellipse, and it's also in 3 dimensions. And look, these things are, and this was done without parametric design, without computers. This was done all manually, you know. I mean, the calculations, the sensitivity, the imagination, the knowledge of the love of it, the love of the difficulties of the work. If he wanted the easy way out and he wanted to rush home, to watch TV, of course, there were no TVs at that time, he would have chosen a different kind of work. But no, he complicated himself because he wanted truth, his truth, the truth of his time and the truth of his soul and his mind. And he chose the difficult road. But there are rewards in that difficult road. Is the reward of excellence, of spiritual and artistic excellence. Now, he didn't do these statues in the corner, but I show them because they are part of this intersection. And indeed, the church is called San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane. Why are we not building fountains in our cities? You know, why? Why are we not relating our works to mythology, to gods and goddesses, to mythological animals and so on? Really, our life is so banal and prosaic, and we don't dream, or if we dream of escaping Earth and going with Mr. Elon Musk to Mars, because we arrived at hating the Earth. Why? Because we are in the process of destroying it. That's why. As I said, you know, so this is the western facade, and this is the northern facade, and the northern facade is rather, you know, banal, but inside is this. And what can we say? And this is just the ceiling anyway. He must have had, I don't know. Why did he commit suicide? Some people think that because of his enmity with Bernini, who knows? Said, a very accomplished architect arriving at despair. This is the pavement within the church. So again, a very, very, very famous Baroque architectural work, San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane by Francesco Borromini in Rome. It's a womb. That's what it is. It is an architectural womb. It is the womb of Eve, if we are to use the little word invented by Freud, or the womb of irrationality, the womb of ellipses, the womb of the unknown. And maybe, I mean, there is much to say about this, I think. Of course, there are dangers related to this womb, as I call it, to it, to the wildness of the irrational forces within our soul, within our imagination. Now, Santivo alla Sapienza in Rome, another work by him, Borromini employed concave and convex forms in the design of the facade of the chapel, which is here. The dome, which is supported by a convex drum-like structure, is here, is topped by an ornate spiraling lantern. Again, the ellipse and the spiral, both scandals for excessively controlling reason. The star shape of the centralized plan rises through the interior elevation from the floor into the dome to create a single, dynamic, unified, and cohesive space. So he didn't do the whole building. He worked on the facade. He worked on the culmination of the building at the top, and he worked also, I think, on the courtyard. Francesco Borromini. It moves me, you know, and I really, I mean, what I try to do is not to close, you know, you know, to sketch in a way a dead end street. Quite the opposite. I want to open a door to incite people to, after this modest presentation, to investigate further, to study further the work of Francesco Borromini or Joseph Paxton or Antonio da Sangallo, about whom I'm going to talk next. These are just preliminary steps to incite a curiosity, to make people desire to study further, because they deserve. I mean, these architects deserve to be known as much as possible. They do not belong to the past, even though he died in 1667. In my opinion, great art, and not just art, great writing, great music, great philosophy, great anything, doesn't die. The past, the past that truly matters doesn't pass. It's within us, and it might continue even beyond us. Borromini is not that. I mean, he tried to escape the responsibility of eternity or living eternally by excluding himself from life, but he didn't succeed. As you can see, in Bucharest on the 3rd of August 2021, we talk about him. So sorry, Mr. Borromini, you didn't succeed in you know, removing yourself from life. You are still there, very much so. That's why we talk about you. So this chapel is somewhere in between Piazza Navona and the Pantheon, the great structure built by, in part, commissioned, but some say he might even have contributed to the design, the great Emperor Adrian. So the Pantheon, Piazza Navona, and here is the work by Francesco Borromini. Rome is full of jewels, indeed. And you see these curves, these insistent curves, which challenge our static disposition and want us to be dynamic, to think and feel dynamically. The same it's achieved by the spiral. This is in the drawing, but that's how it was built. Santivo alla Sapienza. There are all kinds of interesting information. I mean, lots of things relating to this building. For example, the symbolism of the bee. I didn't read very carefully an article I came across, but apparently the presence of the bee is not at all accidental. After all, what would the bee do inside the chapel? An interesting question. But if you investigate through this website, you can read more about, you know, it's an esoteric presence of the bee within the building and the iconography of the building, which is very inciting. I mean, this is pagan, no? I mean, what does the bee have to do with Christianity? Well, you know, the unconventional artist allowed himself to think out of the box, so to speak. So the bee is right in the center of the chapel. You know, it's not God, it's not Jesus, it's the bee. Very interesting, is it not? again, speculative architecture, meaning an idealized architecture, meaning an idealized geometry, a metaphysical architecture. The metaphysical side of architecture, we totally neglect these days. But we cannot have a great architecture in the absence of its metaphysical substance. You need physicality, but you also need what we approximate with a word like metaphysics. You need both. That's what Gemme Cantacuzino meant when he said the architect builds for man and his gods. Well, what gods? We don't build for any gods these days. And we totally forgot the metaphysical side of architecture. And that is a great, great loss. Maybe we forgot the B, maybe. Here again, Francesco Borromini, the great emperor and artist and collector Adrian, and the Pantheon, and the great Piazza Navona. Actually, in this building also he contributed together with his rival Bernini, and Borromini together worked on this building. And here there are statues by the great Bernini. You know, the soul becomes inflamed when you think or you contemplate the works of these people. And my question to me, to myself, and to you who are here, hopefully a few of you, is what are we doing to be no less than they were? The B, maybe the B, maybe we should think more about the B. What a prestigious position for the B within the chapel. Progetto per la lanterna di Santivo alla Sapienza. Here is a drawing, a magnificent drawing, a sensitive, graceful drawing by the great Francesco. Why did he leave us in 1667? Why? Will we ever know? So this is the building, this is the courtyard, kind of almost halfway between the Pantheon and Piazza Navona. This is also possibly a drawing by him, the plan of the chapel. So here we actually see the spiral of Francesco Borromini and the dome with a big oculus of the Pantheon. Oculus through which the rain and the snow enters the building. I remember once I went to Rome to make a film at Christmas, and I was disappointed by the pomp at the Vatican or at San Pietro. So I came, it was midnight, I came to the Pantheon and I entered the Pantheon, and I saw some white dots here in the darkness of the oculus, and I didn't know what they were. And later on, I realized that they were actually pigeons flying in the opening of the oculus in the middle of the night on Christmas Eve in that year when I visited Rome. Cortile della Sapienza, Chiesa Santivo, with a B at the center. This drawing probably was not done by him, but it's a nice drawing nevertheless of the plan of the chapel. Now helicoidal staircase in Palazzo Barberini, Rome from 1630 approximately. Again, he loved the dynamics of the spiral, and here we see it in this staircase as well. Spiraling around truth, maybe spiraling around the B. This is San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane, Santivo, again the facade of San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane. This is the church, I think, in Piazza Navona, but I'm not sure. Yes, he worked only on the facade, but other parts of the building were done by Bernini. This is a section through San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane. This is just my material about Borromini is a little deficient because I don't have the works chronologically in a rigorous manner. Next time I should create another presentation. So this staircase we already saw at Palazzo Barberini. The spiral and the ellipse, well, the spiral is about becoming as opposed to being. Being is served better by the circle. Becoming is served better by an open-ended circle, which is the spiral. It's not quite a circle. So that's where the ellipse insinuates itself, because the ellipse somehow with its two centers problematizes the certitudes of the circle, and process or processuality, process as an expression of becoming has the chance to manifest itself. Okay, I accelerate a little bit because I still have to talk about Antonio da Sangallo. This is indeed a difficult day to talk about for architects. In the same time, it's a little challenging, but I will continue. So, Borromini, Italian Baroque architecture. We already saw the work in English, doesn't sound so good. Church of St. Charles of the Four Fountains. No, San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane. This is its name, and that's how it should be in Italian. We see there the word fluid. Of course, the Baroque art is about fluidity. And that it is in a way the fluidity of life, the dynamic oval, you know, oval, the ellipse, the spiral. All these things are part of the Baroque vocabulary, which refuses to be pinned down in something static. It wants to move. It wants the dynamics of movement. That's the Baroque art. Or architecture. So we are within San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane. This is the plan of the building. This we saw with the B at the center. Santivo alla Sapienza, again a fragment of the ceiling of San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane, the ceiling of Santivo alla Sapienza. Back to San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane, and graphic you know, analysis done more recently, of course. But we see that in a way the duality of the ellipse, the presence of the two circles and the two centers. The drawing by Borromini. This is not by him, it's a recent artwork based on his. Now we arrive at something interesting. This is Mario Botta, the contemporary Swiss architect who celebrated, I don't know on what occasion, maybe probably 400 years since the birth of Borromini. He built San Carlino near Lake Lugano in Switzerland, which is a very interesting work. He actually recreated through a section through San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane the work in Rome. and he planted it, near Lake Lugano in Switzerland. I think it's a very effective and emotional work, and it's a nice homage to Francesco Borromini, I would say. Bravo to Mario Botta. He was not always as inspired in his works, but I think here it was an expression of genuine affection for Francesco Borromini. Sketch by Mario Botta. This is done in wood, but it's very effective. This is the facade in stone of the church in Rome, and this is the replica, the mem in a way of the building in Rome by Mario Botta, if we can call it by Mario Botta. Mario Botta just replied in a way to the work by Borromini through his own work. I mean, Borromini's work. Impressive. Impressive because it's more than a didactic work and a work which pays homage. It is a work which pays homage, but also teaches, and also it's almost a metaphysical shadow of the building in Rome at the edge of Lake Lugano in Switzerland. We saw this, sorry, some of these images. It's also interesting, the sculptural works that adorn the building. It's not just the building, it's not just walls and roof and floor. It's a complex organism, and it has also narration. I do not, in the absence of sufficient knowledge, I do not know exactly the meaning of these figures there, but I'm sure they transgress, they go beyond just having, visual effects. I imagine there is a story being told through some of these sculptures, and we are going to end the presentation on Borromini with the works of an Italian photographer who created some artistic photographs based on his work. Anyway. Now, on the left is San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane by Borromini, and on the right is a fragment of a building by Frank Gehry in New York City. But Frank Gehry was actually not so much inspired by Borromini, but by Bernini, the rival of Borromini. Chiesa di Sant'Ivo, Roma. The human drama, the human life is present in these buildings. These buildings speak to us after centuries. Why do they speak to us? Because the people who made them were alive. They suffered just like us. Life was never easy, it will never be easy, but they left something behind. And perhaps we should attempt to do something similar if we can. Not in a grandiose manner, no. Even in a modest way, I think we can contribute to the beauty of the world. Yes, I have to make another presentation. This one is a little bit disorganized, and I apologize. There are too many pictures here that do not have a clear connection to each other. Sant'Andrea delle Frate is another building he worked on. also in Rome. Now, Francesca Pompei, this is the Italian artist who made photographs of Borromini's works. And I will end the presentation today on Francesco Borromini with her photographs. What do we see here? We see the drama of human life. And the drama of human life was externalized visually and artistically in various ways in the buildings of Francesco Borromini. And of course, not only Francesco Borromini, but in this case, we talk about him. And since art is about communication, we have the communication now, not just between us and Borromini, but also between Borromini and Francesca, the Italian photographer who took these photographs. What we see here again is a singing art or a speaking art. It is an art which narrates something. It speaks something. It is not an art which says nothing. In fact, art is about communication. I kept saying this. The oldest etymology of the word art that I found was art equals bridge equals God. So it's about communication. It's about bridging. You call these details, but the details are part of the symphonic work. This one we saw already. The bee and the emperor, maybe, and light and shadow and the human drama. Okay, so now we go to the fourth architect that I will talk about today, and that is Antonio da Sangallo the Younger. He's also associated with August III. I think he died on this day. So let me activate the presentation. Antonio da Sangallo the Younger, the architect that Michelangelo hated. And that's not a little thing, you know, to have someone like Michelangelo hate you. He was probably very good if Michelangelo hated him. Born 1484, died in 1546. So he died at 62. Antonio da Sangallo the Younger, you see, he died on the 3rd of August, 1546, also known as Antonio da Sangallo, was an Italian architect. I'm sorry. Was an Italian architect active during the Renaissance, mainly in Rome and the Papal States. So while Francesco Borromini died in 1667, Antonio da Sangallo died in 1546. So he died, let's see if I can count now, 121 years before Francesco Borromini died. Some drawings by Antonio da Sangallo. He did many things. He was even a military architect, kind of an engineer, you know, geometrical and mathematical scribbles like many architects do and know, sketches, trembling or not. This was his proposal for San Pietro in Rome. Of course, it was not built this way, but this is what Antonio da Sangallo proposed. Basilica della Santa Casa in Loreto. This is his work. The right. Renaissance, Italian Renaissance was prior to the Baroque. Interesting interior. A small work, but I mean, in terms of dimensions, but rather interesting, the interior. He was also a sculptor, of course. I say, of course, because at that time, most architects were also artists. They were also artists, engineers, jewelers, you know, the craftsmen even, you know, I envy those people, you know. Today, you have people of talent whose talents are dying because they are not used and they are not even usable. You know, society doesn't need them. It's sad. Capella Paolina, the Sala Regia and the Scala Regia in the Vatican. Who is building the churches in Romania? We don't know. What architects, what artists? Are they known? Nobody knows. I mean, isn't it sad? There are talented architects in the country. There are talented artists. Why are they not used creatively, not in a dogmatic way, like they were used at that time in Italy, as we can see? He built this famous stair at the Vatican, Antonio da Sangallo, the younger. Bernini did some of the statues here, but look at this. I mean, it's a conjunction of great artistic efforts and the meeting between at least two geniuses. Scala Regia. Regia, I don't know Italian, unfortunately. I should know, I should have known, but I don't. Shame on me. It's a great work. It's almost like walking up towards God here. Antonio da Sangallo the younger. And look at the plan and look at the section. So the perspectival effect is amplified because of the narrowing as you know, as you approach the destination of walking up the stair. A brilliant work. Again, metaphysics were part of architecture. If you eliminate metaphysics from architecture, there is a great risk that the work you do is prosaic in the best sense of the word. You need to bring in the speculative dimension of architecture, the philosophical one even. Old Fortress in Livorno, as I said, he was also a military architect, an engineer, and he did many things. He was not just an artist, as if that would not have been enough. But even Michelangelo did works for, you know, there are beautiful drawings of Michelangelo you know, he imagined, you know, ideal fortresses, how to defend a fortress against the enemy. So they were essentially military, you know, studies done by Michelangelo. This is Antonio da Sangallo the younger. 5 centuries ago, this was built, approximately. How will our works be in 500 years? Are we asking this question? Palazzo Baldassini in Rome, an urban, palace integrated within the urban fabric. Interesting graphic works here on the walls. They are very cryptical, almost hieroglyphical. I don't know what they represent, but they intrigue me. Again, we do not narrate anything in our buildings. We don't use ornaments. We don't externalize a story. We just have white walls and we are concerned with space, and space again, but it's something very sterile in that preoccupation with space alone. This is not just about space. It's about many things. Palazzo del Governatore di Borgo in Rome. It was demolished in 1936. How could you demolish something that was almost 450 years old? Palazzo Farnese, designed for Cardinal Alessandro Farnese. Here also Michelangelo worked at the top of the building, and I think now it's the French embassy here in Rome. It's a famous palace in Rome, Palazzo Farnese. I guess the intersections between Michelangelo and Antonio da Sangallo were complex, and sometimes, yes, artists and architects they hate each other. I read that Michelangelo hated Antonio da Sangallo, the younger. So I guess I don't know, did he have reasons? Something irritated the turbulent Michelangelo in Antonio da Sangallo. Who knows? So this is Palazzo Farnese. Yes, the French embassy took over this building for I don't know how many years. They chose well, of course. It's a prestigious location. Palazzo Sacchetti on the Via Giulia in Rome, designed by Sangallo for himself. Can you imagine? He was doing well, obviously. Maybe Michelangelo also hated him because of this. I don't know. Look at this. With stone on the pavement. I mean, these are great rooms. Well, towards the outside is not so impressive, but the inside is. Even Raphael, although he died young at 37, he was planning to build for him a huge palace for himself in Rome. So, these artists were doing well. They were recognized, acknowledged by the society and the powers of their time, and I guess remunerated accordingly. I mean, just the pavement of this room would cost today a fortune. Who could afford to build such a pavement in stone, with complicated geometries and colors and so on? It's, most architects in Bucharest live in modest circumstances in blocks of flats. even successful ones. No architect today, at least in this country, would imagine living, having such a room for himself or herself. Impossible. St. Patrick's Well in Orvieto. This is an interesting work. It's a well, an engineering work. It's a pragmatic work, but it's impressive nevertheless. And it's big, Look at the silhouettes, the human beings there, and then we'll plunge into the interior. Look at this. Antonio da Sangallo, the younger, who died on the 3rd of August. It's quite a work, really. Meravigliosa Umbria. And it's not the smallest or the most modest well in the world. Far from it. It's huge. It descends to the very viscera of the earth. Santa Maria di Loreto in Rome, another work by da Sangallo. Different from Borromini, but Borromini lived 150 years later or so. You can tell the difference between the Baroque spirit and the Renaissance spirit. The Baroque spirit became more adventurous, less stable. It was the instability of the Baroque related to its quest for a dynamic engagement with reality and with the artistic expression of that reality. This you can tell it's more stable. It's not flirting with too many destabilizing factors. No. But it is a nice church by Antonio da Sangallo. It is. Even without being so becoming as San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane. Trajan's column, not far away, as you can see, on which the head of Decebalus or Decebal was presented, was sculpted by the Roman sculptors with great respect, from what I read. It's a very dignified portrait of the Dacian king. This is the interior of the church by Antonio da Sangallo the Younger. Now San Giovanni dei Fiorentini, also in Rome, another church. St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, he was the chief architect from 1520 on, but as I said, his plan, his proposal was not built as he envisioned it. You know, these do not exist. This is the model of his proposal, but you know, it was built differently, based in good measure on the work of Michelangelo and others. But he was a chief architect there on the building site for San Pietro. Actually, his vision was not so without interest. I wonder how it would have been if it was built in this way. So this is the San Pietro as it was not to be. Villa Madama in Rome, a large building where the various architects contributed. It wasn't just him. Then the Villa Farnese in Caprarola, the initial design was by Sangallo and Baldassare Peruzzi. That's it. So it is 8 o'clock. And how do I stop this? Okay.